Hello again and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Sylvie and you're listening to the Vacant Lot Podcast. This is a podcast where I relive and recap some of the best moments from one of my favorite cartoon series growing up, Hey Arnold. So yes, I've finally gotten behind the microphone again. It's getting a little difficult to maintain my promises, I see. I know I wanted to do an episode once a month, so I should have had an episode out by late May. And here we are in early June. What's important is that I'm finally doing the episode. It's not monthly, but I'm crossing my fingers that I can get the next episode out by July, so we're back on a monthly basis. But anyway, before I get into today's topic, I wanted to discuss some feedback I'd gotten from the previous episode. If you remember the last podcast, I talked about the worst episodes of Hey Arnold. And I held my breath and anticipated that there would be some murmurings on what I thought were the worst episodes and whether or not people would agree or not. And I did actually get some feedback through the email from an individual who, while they agree that Phoebe's Little Problem is not a strong episode, they argue it's not the worst episode. I'll basically give the meat and potatoes of the email. Basically, the individual said that Curly's Girl, which is another season 5 episode, they argue that Curly's Girl is the worst episode of the series. And they gave a litany of reasons why, basically stating it's Rhonda torture porn. It's a whole episode where everyone treats Rhonda poorly, and Curly's character has his psychosis magnified times 11. So those factors, coupled with a few minor complaints about the animation and just how the characters treat Rhonda, all that combined is this person's reason for why Curly's Girl is the worst episode in Hey Arnold. And first of all, I want to thank the person who wrote in. I appreciate their opinion. As I had said, not everyone's going to have the same thoughts on what the worst episode is. I wanted to address my reasons for not putting Curly's Girl on the list. I wouldn't even really consider it an honorable mention as worst episodes. And I think this comes into play with what I was talking about when I did the initial episode. And that's that a lot of lists that deal with the best episodes or the worst episodes of the series, they're very personal. So there might be reasons that a person loves the episode, and it might relate to things in their life or their history that might not translate for another fan of the show. For example, a few months ago I watched a list for top 10 best episodes of Hey Arnold from another YouTuber. I think it's Ranter and Shades, but it might be his partner. There are actually two YouTubers that basically did the same episode, but just with their own feedback on what the best episodes of Hey Arnold were. And what struck me is that both fans didn't put a lot of Helga episodes on their list. I don't recall if there were any, actually, with the exception of maybe Helga on the Couch. Maybe one of them, I think, had that on their list. But it was very telling that a lot of the episodes didn't deal with Helga. And I think it comes into play is that these are both male fans. I'm a female fan, so maybe I regard Helga in a different light than like a boy who watched the show. And also there was, I remember, I think one of the top episodes was actually a Harold episode on the list, which I don't know if I'd have any Harold episodes in my top 10. But it just struck me as he gave his reasons for liking the episode. And when he talked about it, it was very personal rationale for why the Harold episode was placed so high on the list. And that's the point I want to address. Like, these lists are very personal. I could actually discuss my feelings for the episode Curly's Girl. It's not one of my favorite episodes, but the episode Curly's Girl does resonate with me for a few reasons. Yeah, even for a season 5 episode, I don't dislike it. Maybe if I did a top 10 list of episodes that I didn't hate from season 5, Curly's Girl would actually be among them. And these are my reason why. So, I don't know if it's been addressed in the past, but Rhonda's actually one of my favorite characters. I'm a huge Rhonda fan. Her character is just so dramatic and just so fun to see her get into different scenarios. When the creators place her or give Rhonda conflict, it seems to translate very positively, or it translates well into a very entertaining episode. the person who emailed me argued that Curly's Girl is a form of Rhonda torture porn. And yes, that's true, but I counter with the argument, is that really a bad thing? Like, some of the best episodes of shows sometimes deal with characters getting the comeuppance that they deserve, and it results in some delicious schadenfreude. To give an example from another show where I kind of like these episodes where the character in question is going through some conflict and it's just a train wreck. Season 3 of the show King of the Hill is the episode Peggy's Pageant Fever, in which the character Peggy Hill, Hank Hill's wife, decides to enter a beauty contest. And if you're familiar with the character from the show, she's, well, not an ugly character. She's not the most comely or attractive woman in Arlen, Texas. She's usually known for her brains as opposed to her beauty. So it's kind of delicious torture to watch her struggle and really try her darndest to be competent or be competitive in the pageant and fail all the way. It kind of works in the opposite way because Peggy's not one of my favorite characters, so it actually is enjoyable to see her go through her trials and tribulations in episodes such as Peggy's Pageant Fever. But I do like Rhonda. Rhonda seems like a fun character to write. I love the episode Rhonda's Glasses. Cool party, in no small part, is enjoyable due to Rhonda's snobbiness. So seeing Rhonda suffer doesn't really break the episode for me. Another reason that I like the episode, and again, this is highly personal, when the show Hey Arnold initially came out in 96, not too long afterwards, there was a small smattering of Hey Arnold fan pages on the internet. The big two at the time were the unofficial Hey Arnold page and Gerald's Gateway of Tales. And Gerald's Gateway of Tales was basically a hub for a lot of the earlier fanfics of Hey Arnold. It's long since been gone. I tried almost yearly on the Wayback Machine to see if I could dig it up, but most of the original fanfics have long since been gone, which is heartbreaking. But one of the biggest features of Gerald's Gateway of Tale was actually on the message board, because the message board had a small section dedicated entirely for role-playing. So it was a Hey Arnold role-playing kind of game on the board. It's a little silly now that I mention it, but basically people could pick a character from the show, or they could make up their own character, provided that it wasn't a Mary Sue, and inject it within the world of Hey Arnold. And people would write in the perspective of the character, other people would read that, and then add on to it. So it was kind of a ongoing collaborative fanfic in a way. And one of the interesting scenarios that came out of it came from a person that frequented the site, not so much for fan fiction, but assisted with making a lot of fan art for the site. Her name was Cadpig. She had her own Hey Arnold site actually at the time too, but it was dedicated entirely to Curly. So it came to no surprise that that particular creator made a character who was infatuated with the character of Curly. I can't remember if she was both that character and her original character, but she was definitely a character that was infatuated with Curly. And so there was this very unique storyline that came about where Curly was like the original Christian Grey in that he was dirty, stinking rich. And I don't know I don't know why this came about, but I guess maybe to supplement a lot of the crazy schemes that went on. It would just be easier if money was limitless. So Curly's character in the fandom was seen as a bit of just an insanely rich student. So fast forward more than 5 years later, when season 5 finally came out and Curly's Girl came out, what I found kind of intriguing about the episode was that Rhonda and Curly are at a party, and it's at the party where Rhonda gets a stain on her mother's fur coat, and it's up to Curly to save the day. And a few things strike me as interesting about the episode. Curly at the party is dressed actually rather nicely, a total 180 from how he dresses at school. He's wearing almost like a nice designer black turtleneck sweater, and just almost on par with Rhonda in terms of style. And then after the fact, when Curly tries to save the day, he sneaks her into a laundromat, which I assume is owned by his parents. But then, for someone who was familiar with the RPG, you kind of fill in the holes on your own. So you think, well, maybe Curly is rich, or maybe the creators of the show took a page from the RPG and made it so that Curly was rich, more of a nouveau rich, where his family were laundromat tycoons. They cornered the market of all the laundromats within Hillwood, and that's why Curly is rich. So it's never really been confirmed that Curly is one of the richer kids, but having that knowledge of the RPG and then watching Curly's Girl, it was kind of exciting because it was fun to imagine that some fanon, some unofficial fan canon created by the fans, was kind of indirectly translated into the show, and I found that awesome. So to the person that wrote me, I understand, I embrace your reasons for disliking Curly's Girl, but for the reasons that I've explained, I cannot dislike Curly's Girl. It has a personal place in my heart for those very personal reasons. So that's all I wanted to say on that matter. Okay, so moving on, as I might have already mentioned, I am recording this episode in June. If you do the math, that means that the San Diego Comic-Con will be starting in a little over a month. That piece of information is significant because a lot of fans speculate that there'll be some sort of major reveal, be it a teaser or some footage from the movie, from the Jungle movie, that will be revealed during the San Diego Comic-Con in mid-July. That also means from this point in early June, we are now less than 6 months away from the premiere of the Jungle movie, if we are to believe that it's sometime in November, close to Thanksgiving, that the Jungle movie is supposed to come out. So, given this information, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on what I feel or what I expect will come from the Jungle movie. In fact, I actually looked back at some of my initial thoughts about the Jungle movie from over 10 years ago. As I'd mentioned earlier, there were quite a bit of sites for Hey Arnold in the early heydays, from the late 90s to early 2000s. I'd say the peak of popularity is probably between, I want to say, 1999 to 2001. That's where you had the really heavy hitters. You had the unofficial Hey Arnold page, you had Gerald's Gateway of Tales. I was a huge fan of Nadine's Place. Mega Wacky Max was a bilingual user that carried one of the best fanfics that I've ever read, Project Phoebe. I always geek out about it all the time, but it was one of my favorite fanfics, but anyway, that's beyond the point. So there were a lot of very popular and very active Hey Arnold pages back in the day. Towards the end of the peak of the Hey Arnold fandom, there was a page that came out on Yahoo groups, which was really just basically a message board where people congregated and discussed the show. And that was called Arnold's Room. That was curated by a user named Steven. And so he curated the Arnold's Room fan page. And I was pretty active on that. That was probably one of the last Hey Arnold fan sites that I frequented, and probably one of the last active ones before the majority of fans, both new and old, congregated to Facebook. So there came a point where I reflected on what I felt should happen with the Jungle movie if it ever came out. Now, mind you, it still seemed hopeful in 2004 because the movie had just come out 2 years prior. So even though the movie didn't do well, it only made $6 million. It was in 6th place on this opening weekend. Even though it didn't really succeed to Nickelodeon standards, the fans were still hopeful that the series would get a sequel. I was one of those fans that chimed in around the end of 2004 and wrote this kind of speculative piece on what I expected with the Jungle movie. I think at the time I believed it would still be made, but I had my pessimism on when. I didn't think it was going to be an immediate thing. I'm going to read what I wrote back in 2004 and reflect on what my expectations were for the Jungle movie shortly after the movie came out. And then I'll give my thoughts on it afterwards. When I think of the fate of Hey Arnold, I'm often left to wonder that if we ever see the Jungle movie outside of mere speculation and ambitious fanfics, it may be many, many years in the future. I say this because there has been animated movies where a proposed sequel hasn't been brought into fruition until a good decade after the original was released on the big screen. The Little Mermaid is a good example. It took 10 years for the sequel to come out. It wasn't good and it wasn't terrible. It was just okay. That's the middle ground. But suppose it takes even longer for the Jungle movie to come out. Say, hypothetically, 20 years from today, just out of the blue in a national newspaper, a small article is run stating that the creator of the 90s animated series Hey Arnold has struck a deal with another prominent film studio and is in the process of making a sequel to the ill-fated Hey Arnold movie. All pandemonium would break loose. Fans, now a good deal over 30, recall their once favorite cartoon and count the days until its triumphant release. Hey Arnold marathons will play on all the kid-friendly stations. We would assume that the fat cats over at Nick would finally have conceded and given Bartlett back the rights to his show at that point. Fast food chains market the movie with kids' meal quality toys, and toy stores sell numerous items bearing the name of the upcoming sequel, The Jungle Movie. It all seems like a beautiful dream, but like I said, it is possible. It's also possible a stunt that bold would either satisfy fans or insult them. Do you remember The Rescuers Down Under? It's a very good movie for a sequel. One of the most significant moments of the film was the scene where Bernard finally proposed to Miss Bianca. I can imagine the creator of the original Rescuers was pretty happy to finally have the two characters hook up after so many years. And so you can imagine how Hey Arnold fans would react to finally see Arnold hug his parents or be the one to kiss Helga, not vice versa. There's also an ugly side to this fantasy. And if you recall The Secret of NIMH, it really set the bar for animated films back in the 80s. That movie also had a sequel. And if you've seen that sequel, then you could easily see where I'm going with this. If not, then I suggest you go to the following pages, whose links I'll leave on my Vacant Lot podcast page. Long story short, The Secret of NIMH 2 was a blatant attempt to cash in on the fame of the previous film. It lacked virtually everything, from a decent and consistent storyline to the same dark tone to the movie's creator, Don Bluth. It even had singing. It thoroughly sucked and would in no way appeal to faithful fans of the original. Therefore, one of two things may happen if the Jungle movie isn't made until the year 2022. A. We'll get a good sequel, faithful to the original series, and closure in the fact that Arnold finds his parents and confesses his deep-down admiration for Helga. Or B. We'll get a direct-to-video cash grabber with 5 show-stopping songs, a new cast of memorable characters, and an adventure that you don't want to miss. In other words, kiddie fair crap. I assume we all hope for the former instead of the latter. Sure, it may look different, and the original voice actors will all be grown, and they'll have to get new ones, but hey, if the fans get what they've been asking for after 20 years, then it's well worth the wait. So that's the end of what I wrote back in 2004. So looking at it, there's some predictions that I've made that were close, and some not so close. For example, I was predicting that the movie wouldn't come out until 2022. So I'm glad to see that I'm 5 years off. I'm 5 years too late as opposed to 5 years too early. I make a note in the article that a lot of the fans will be over 30 at the time the movie comes out. Well, I will be exactly 30 when the movie comes out. So I'm within the age range that I thought. I make a comment about the creator, Craig Bartlett, coming back, which is correct. Craig Bartlett is behind it, so that's a good thing. The whole thing about the merchandising, the Happy Meals and stuff, that remains to be seen. I've noticed a lot more images of Hey Arnold merchandise just in general, be it Walmart, Hot Topic. Back in the day, apparently the only places you could find Hey Arnold stuff was like at the Nickelodeon store in Chicago or something. It was extremely rare to find a lot of Hey Arnold merchandise. In fact, I think the only Hey Arnold merchandise I owned at the time was a squishy Hey Arnold head I'd gotten from a yard sale, and I believe it was a Helga I think it was a Helga Happy Meal toy from Wendy's. But other than that, I really didn't have a whole lot of Hey Arnold merchandise. So I'm hoping there'll be more once the movie comes out. I doubt it because it's a TV movie. It doesn't have the same impact as a theatrical release. But, you know, the aftermath may result in more items. And finally, the thing that I'm most pleasantly surprised at being wrong about was stating that even when the movie comes out, we're going to get different voice actors, so it won't quite be the same, but, you know, it's better than nothing. So I'm actually very, very happy that while we're not getting all the voice actors back for obvious reasons, most of them are grown up, we are getting the best ones. We are getting the ones that matter. We're getting the voice actor for Harold back. We're getting the voice actor for Gerald and Arnold back. We're getting the voice actor for Helga, Phoebe, Rhonda, Grandpa, and Grandma. So I'm perfectly happy with that because I really didn't expect we'd get anyone back except maybe Grandpa and Grandma. So that's a pleasant surprise. It was interesting to go back and read my thoughts back in the day and see what had actually come into fruition. In the article, I gave 2 examples of movies. So again, if you're not familiar with the 2 movies, The Rescuers Down Under is the sequel to the 1977 film The Rescuers. I've always loved The Rescuers Down Under. Maybe I'm a bit biased because I grew up with the film and I actually saw Down Under before I saw the original Rescuers. But it was a landmark film. Even though it failed when it came out, it opened the floodgates for studios to take notice and actually bother to make official sequels for animated theatrical films. I feel like our world would be much different had, say, they had the foresight to not release The Rescuers Down Under around the same time as Home Alone, and The Rescuers Down Under would have succeeded. We might have had a lot more ambitious studios releasing quality movies to theaters instead of the almost decade-long assembly line of direct-to-video crap we had gotten in the dark ages of Disney. I always put The Rescuers Down Under on a pedestal as being the best-case scenario for a movie to get a sequel several years after the fact. You get better animation, better villains, better conclusion to an open-ended plot line. It was the gold standard in how you do an animated sequel right. And so on the flip side, I thought of another mouse movie, The Secret of NIMH 2, Timmy to the Rescue. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with The Secret of NIMH. It's Don Bluth's first movie, came out in early 1980s. It's one of the best animated films ever made, and it's dark as heck, but it's awesome. And so sometime I think around the late 90s, they decided to go ahead and make a sequel to The Secret of NIMH without the involvement of Don Bluth. And, horrible just doesn't describe it. It's like everything wrong with the aforementioned direct-to-video Disney crap that came out. It's present in Timmy to the Rescue. It's bad animation, almost Saturday morning cartoon quality. It's just a total tonal shift. It's no longer dark and brooding and atmospheric. It's light and kind of cartoony, and it's just bad. It's just an insult to the people who grew up with the original one, and it's a very blatant cash grab just for studios to make money. So that's the other spectrum that could potentially happen. That's not out of the realm of possibility that could happen with Hey Arnold. I want to conclude with my reasonings for why I feel the movie will be good and the Jungle movie will be similar to Rescuers Down Under and not Timmy to the Rescue. I have a brief short list of reasons why I'm confident the movie will succeed and appease both the fans and stakeholders at Nickelodeon. So first of all, the most obvious thing, Craig Bartlett, the creator, is at the helms of the movie. It seems like an obvious thing, but it's easy to take that for granted. There's lots of properties that creators return to only to totally botch them or totally wreck them. My immediate thought is John Kraflowski. I know I messed up his name. John Kay, the creator of Ren and Stimpy. I was a huge Ren and Stimpy fan growing up. Ren and Stimpy was one of the original 3, along with Rugrats and Doug, to come out on Nickelodeon. And it had a successful run. I think about halfway through season 2, Nickelodeon gave the creator the can, and they decided to just churn out a bunch of other episodes until the show was done. And when I was really young, I couldn't tell the difference. And then once I finally got my hands on the internet and found out what happened, I was one of those people that was like, oh my god, that's a travesty, it's an outrage, I should give the show back to John Kay. John Kay would bring the show back to its original glory and luster. So, fast forward about 5-6 years later, after the show ends, and the newly minted Spike TV decides to make a cartoon block for cartoons for, I think it was cartoons for effing adults. That was their tagline. So amongst the block were 3 shows, 2 of which were just an embarrassment. Probably one of the worst adult-oriented cartoons I'd ever seen. There was Gary the Rat, which was an animated show about a lawyer that was turned into a rat and I guess had to find a way to change back. But the biggest flaw with the show Gary the Rat was just Gary was not a likable character. And that kills any show, no matter how good the writing or no matter how good the animation. If the character sucks, then the show's gonna suck. And Gary the Rat was not a nice character, so that show got canned very quickly. The other show was Stripperella. It was a animated show of a stripper voiced by Pamela Anderson that I think fought crime or was a superhero or something. Yeah, that didn't do well either. And then the third one on the block was Ren and Stimpy. Yes, Ren and Stimpy. Actually, there were two versions of Ren and Stimpy. They brought back the original Ren and Stimpy, plus an episode that had never before been seen. It was created but never released on Nickelodeon, titled Man's Best Friend. That was okay. That was cool to get the original series back, because I don't think it had been on the air for quite a few years after the show got canceled. And then there was the brand new series created by the creator of Ren and Stimpy himself, John Kay, called Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon. So this was the new and improved, quote-unquote, Ren and Stimpy that John Kay decided to release to the world. And let me tell you, it was... The best advice I can give is do not eat anything while watching the show. In fact, don't even think about eating, especially during the pilot, because the pilot had some of the most disgusting bodily fluid toilet humor gags I'd ever seen. I don't think I'd seen anything that bad until I saw Brickleberry, which I didn't hate Brickleberry, by the way. I'm sad it got canceled. I liked the first season. Neither here nor there. The point I'm trying to make is just because the creator comes back doesn't mean the property will succeed. There is the rare occasion where that could work against a show. So, second reason that I think the show will be okay is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the original voice actors are back. So there is a new voice actor for Gerald and Arnold. However, the original voices of Gerald and Arnold have returned. Their roles in the movie have yet to be determined. I think it's pretty confirmed that Lane Torn will be doing the voice for Wolfgang. But I think a lot of fans think he'll have a secondary role in the movie. He might be the adult Arnold or something like that. So, yeah, it's good to see that they've gotten the voices, a lot of the original cast back. Referring back to why the two Mouse movies that I had mentioned may have succeeded, not succeeded. Rescuers Down Under, they had gotten back the original voices of Bernard and Miss Bianca. Bernard being Bob Newhart and Miss Bianca being Eva Gabor. That played into the authenticity of doing a sequel. Now, with the sequel to The Secret of NIMH, they only got back really 2 voice actors. I'm going to leave the link to an article or a webpage that goes in depth on exactly why the movie was just ill-conceived. But they make a mention of only a smattering of the original cast coming back. Dom DeLuise comes back, but he basically does everything. He comes back as the crow Jeremy, and I think the voice actor of Mr. Ages comes back too, and I think that's about it. There might have been one other one, but those are the only 2 that came back of the entire cast. And also an interesting fun fact, the character that does the voice of Timothy's brother, Martin, who was actually Will Wheaton in the original Secret of NIMH. I'm just finding out right now. That's kind of awesome. The guy who does the voice for Martin in the sequel is Philip Van Dyke. And I guess that's the only cool thing I could say about the sequel, is that it indirectly has a Hey Arnold connection, as dubious as that may be. But yeah, so I think that comes into play too, getting a lot of the original voices back to hammer the nostalgia home. Another reason why I think the movie will succeed, and this may be debatable, this kind of ties into my whole thing on Curly's Girl that I discussed earlier. Because we're in such a connected technological era, it seems that there's more transparency, or there's more back and forth between the fans and the creators, in which case there's a greater ability for pandering. Whether or not you consider it a good or bad thing, your mileage may vary, but I guess the best example I can think of is My Little Pony, right? My Little Pony is crazy popular, and there's tons of fan pages, tons of fan art, tons of just fan lore online. And it's easily accessible. It's not unheard of that the people who watch the show maybe take a page or 2 from what they see online and actually translate it into the show. My best example of that is the character Derpy Hooves. There's a weird little Pegasus on the show that has yellow hair and gray skin. And it was originally relegated as a background character, but a lot of fans made a big to-do about it because the way its eyes were animated made it look like it was cross-eyed. So inexplicably became a fan favorite and people dubbed it Derpy Hooves. And then the whole internet got into an uproar when in one episode, one of the main characters, Rainbow Dash, is actually talking directly to Derpy Hooves and calls her Derpy Hooves, and that's a huge thing. Now, mind you, I think there was a bit of backlash after the fact where Derpy was considered a derogatory term, so the name was quickly scrubbed out. I think there's some merchandise where the character's called Ditsy Doo, but even though it's no longer canon, I guess the fact that they did call the character Derpy Hooves at one point in honor of what the fans had dubbed the character is pretty groundbreaking. Now, do I see the same thing happening with Hey Arnold? Yes. And I'm on the side of yes, just maybe out of sheer selfishness. I, amongst many other fans, had written fan fiction on what we thought would happen with the Jungle movie. So I actually have my own version of what I think the movie should be like. So there's a sense of anticipation, and even though it's a pipe dream, a sense of hope that when the creators, Craig Bartlett and the others, had prepared to write the story for the Jungle movie, that they may have referred to the fandom to see what most people expect for the film. So it would be foolish for anyone to think that they would take the movie, they would base the movie entirely on one person's fanfic. But it's a nice thought to think that they might take the best aspects of multiple fanfics and put it together to make something that pleases everyone. So, again, because we were in the internet era and it's so easy for the fans and the people behind Hey Arnold to get in touch, it makes me hopeful that they know what the fans expect for the Jungle movie and what they don't expect. And from that, they'll make a final product that'll please most of the fandom. Another reason why I think the movie will succeed, overall, it's just a smart business decision. I think so. Like, keep in mind, when Hey Arnold first came out, I was 8 years old. I was young. I was a dumb kid and didn't have a disposable income. I didn't have a job. As much as we cried and whined for a Hey Arnold sequel, the fact remained that the original just wasn't successful. It made hardly any money, and it just got obliterated. I think that was the same weekend that Lilo and Stitch came out, or very, very close. So the movie didn't have a chance, and a lot of fans recognized that the movie should never have been released in theaters anyway. Ironically, the first theatrical film should have been a made-for-TV movie, but the higher-ups decided that if the Rugrats could do it, then Hey Arnold could too, and unfortunately they were quite wrong. So at first glance, it seems like Nickelodeon is finally listening to the fans after almost a decade of pleading for a sequel. But ultimately, it comes down to just business savvy. The people that were children when the movie came out are now full-grown adults with careers, with possibly their own children. And they have the means to get reinvested in the show and put money in it. Heck, like I have my boyfriend has a daughter who I've kind of indoctrinated into the fandom of Hey Arnold. Thankfully, she loves it. But I went out and I bought the entire series of Hey Arnold on DVD on Amazon. And it's something that I enjoy sharing with her. And probably even 5 years ago, if I had known that I could buy it online, maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't. I think when it initially came out, I was still rather young and I didn't think of purchasing it. But now that I'm older and have like a steady job and steady income, it just made sense. So it makes sense now that it makes sense. It's so in vogue right now to tap into 90s nostalgia. So it was only a matter of time before Hey Arnold would become the next target. And that kind of ties into my last reason on why the movie will succeed. And that's because it has to succeed. Hey Arnold is the first of many properties that Nickelodeon wishes to bring back in a big way. The news for the Hey Arnold movie came out in 2015, but as of this date now, in 2017, they're also talking about bringing back Rocko's Modern Life. They want to bring back Invader Zim, which, just a few years ago sounded unheard of. The creator was like, bump that, I'm not doing this again. So I think the Invader Zim reveal is probably the most startling. Yeah, it's not 90s, but like Hey Arnold, it had a cult following. So the fact that they're putting faith into a lot of their cult shows proves that there's something there. There is. And Hey Arnold needs to succeed. The Jungle movie needs to succeed, because if it comes out and it's awful and there's a horrible backlash, then the higher ups at Nickelodeon are like, whoa, time out. I don't know if it's a good idea if we do this thing with Rocko's Modern Life or do something with this property. Maybe we should dial it back. And that's very possible. So, ironically, the Jungle movie is now sitting in the same situation that Rescuers Down Under is in that it has the chance to alter the trajectory of where Nickelodeon is going. What do they have now? Nickelodeon is teetering on irrelevancy now. Disney is going through a renaissance and is just making all the money. Cartoon Network has Steven Universe and a bunch of other properties that are doing really well. What does Nickelodeon have aside from SpongeBob? I really don't know. So, yeah, it seems like a desperation strike that they're going to tap into the nostalgia of people who grew up with these old series. But I embrace it. I really hope that the movie succeeds. Because not only would I like to see Hey Arnold come back, but hey, maybe they'll bring back, I don't know, maybe they'll do more Angry Beavers. Maybe they'll finally take the Wild Thornberrys out of hiatus. I'm holding my tongue on Rugrats, because I think the Rugrats has had enough. The Rugrats time has come and gone. But I just like to see a lot of older properties from my youth make a comeback, and I'd be excited to reintroduce it to a younger generation. So that concludes all I really wanted to talk about now. This is a bit of a more of a rambling episode, but I wanted to get my thoughts out there on what will become a reality in less than half a year. We're getting the Jungle movie. It's happening. And whether or not it's good or not remains to be seen, but we're all hoping for the best. So if you like listening to my podcast, you are very welcome to subscribe to me on iTunes. You can also follow me on Google Play, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, and on Podbean. If you want to send me more feedback, maybe there's another episode you wish to defend, or maybe you want to comment on my thoughts on Curly's Girl today, then you're welcome to visit the site vacantlotpodcast.com and send me a line through the contact us link. Or you can email me directly at thevacantlotpodcast@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with me through Twitter at VacantLotShow. So that's all I really have to say for now. Cross my fingers that I will be back in a month. Other than that, bye-bye. The song you're listening to is Sweatari by the band Escalate. Be sure to download their album The Pop Machine on iTunes. That's the band Escalate, ESCALATE!